Now, imagine you grew up in a house with no mirrors. The only way you knew how or what you looked like was from what your neighbors told you. And every time they described you, they said the same thing. You look sick, you look poor, you look dangerous. Then one day somebody handed you a mirror, a real one, and for the first time you saw yourself clearly. That mirror is called the internet, and right now millions of people are picking it up and saying 5 words that should have made every African pay attention. Now, those scripts aren't scripted. They are real people, many of them from the African diaspora, seeing African cities for the first time. And they are furious, not at Africa, but at the people who hid it from them. But here is what most people miss. This isn't a feel-good TikTok story. What's happening is a quiet power shift, because when you change how the world sees a continent, you change how much the world pays to do business with it. And I'm about to show you the receipts, the actual figure Africa loses every year because of its distorted image. By the end of this video, you would understand why a teenager with a phone in Nairobi might be doing more for Africa's economy than a full room of diplomats. Now, there is an African proverb: until the lion learns how to write, every story would glorify the hunter. You see, for the better part of the century, Africa's story was written by people who never lived there, and the version they published was very selective. When was the last time you saw a story about Africa on BBC or CNN that wasn't about war, famine, or corruption? I'll wait. You see, Africa has challenges. Nobody here pretends otherwise. But the problem was never about the challenges. The problem was that the challenges were the only stories being told. And we now have data to prove it. In June 2025, the University of Bath and an organization called Africa No Filter surveyed over 1,100 people in the UK and the US. Simple question: what comes to mind when you think about Africa? Nearly 58% of responses mention wildlife, not cities, not innovation, animals. When asked about Europe, beautiful architecture, wealth, culture, 75% of respondents had at least one negative association with Africa. For Europe, 13%. Dr. Adam Han, the lead researcher, said Africa still exists as an abstract concept for many people in the West, defined by animals and hardship than people or potential. And the study flagged something uncomfortable. Some actors in the aid sector actively perpetuated these stereotypes, likely to boost donations. And the researchers have argued that this has a net negative effect when it comes to trade with the continent. The very images used to help Africa may have been hurting it. More donations, but less trade. More pity, but less partnerships. Then something nobody predicted: the lion learned to write. In the 2020s, cheap data and smartphones spread across Africa, and platforms like YouTube and TikTok gave anyone with a phone the power to broadcast to the planet. Suddenly, the world saw what it had never been shown: normal life in Africa. Not charity footage, not crisis coverage, just people going to malls, driving on highway, going to concerts, living. Then came the reaction videos. Black Americans shocked after seeing real African cities.
I've been watching Speed streams, and I'm seeing all the love that he's getting in Angola. He's in South Africa.
I gotta go back to Joburg soon.
You didn't think I'd make it to Africa? No way.
Bro, no way. You came all the way to Africa, bro.
Nigga, them people living good. Nigga, them people living better than some of us, nigga.
Millions of views, and the comment section tell us the real story. People writing, I grew up thinking Africa was just villages. My school taught me nothing about this. And then the biggest catalyst, iShow Speed, 20 years old, nearly 50 million subscribers, late 2025 into 2026. This guy did something no government PR campaign has managed. He live streamed himself walking through Lagos, Johannesburg, Accra, Nairobi, live unfiltered, tens of millions watching. The Times of India reported his 28-day tour sparked a global debate about stereotypes. The BBC ran a profile. Black Americans break down in tears after seeing Africa through iShow Speed went viral. Africa No Filter posted on X that iShow Speed's tour proves the power of content creators to rewrite Africa's story. Their line, fairer reporting means fairer finance. So here is my question. What does it say about the global information system that a 20-year-old with a GoPro did more to change perceptions of Africa than decades of diplomacy? Now, hold that thought. The answer has everything to do with money. Now, this is why it stops being a feel-good montage, because this is where it has a price tag. In October 2024, Africa No Filter and consulting firm Africa Practice published the cost of major stereotypes to Africa. What they found? Biased media coverage cost Africa up to $4.2 billion a year in inflated debt servicing costs. Now, here is how it works. When African countries borrow on international markets, the interest rate depends on perceived risk, and perceived risk is heavily shaped by media coverage. The researchers compared election coverage in Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt with Malaysia, Denmark, and Thailand. Similar actual risk profiles, very different media treatment. 88% of media articles about Kenya during its election carried negative sentiment. Words like rigging, corruption dominated in ways they didn't for comparable non-African countries. If media coverage were simply balanced, borrowing rates could drop by up to 1%. That 1% equals $4.2 billion annually. And that only covers Eurobond debt, which is about 6% of Africa's financing. Tourism, FDI, trade, nobody has even calculated that yet. Now ask yourself, if you were a lender who could charge higher rates simply because the media makes a borrower look riskier than they are, would you want that narrative to change? See, lending institutions benefit from higher rates. Rating agencies assign risk partly based on media sentiments. And some aid institutions need the broken African narrative to keep donations flowing. You see, I'm not calling it a conspiracy. I'm calling it structural incentives. And structural incentives produce structural outcomes. You see, I want to take this opportunity to shout out to our Patreon members and YouTube members. If you have not joined these memberships, I don't know what you're waiting for. I've prepared extended research notes on filtered predictions, investment implications, and a Pan-African ripple effect analysis exclusively for members. The link is in the description below. Back to the video. So we have seen the lie and its price tag. Now the invisible war for Africa's story. Three forces are competing for control of Africa's narrative. Force 1, legacy media and parts of the aid industry. The old gatekeepers, bad news about Africa sells, and some aid models depend on the pity narrative. Force 2, African creators and organizations like Africa No Filter, backed by the Ford Foundation, Bloomberg, and Open Society Foundations, plus organic creators, travel vloggers in Zanzibar, tech reviewers in Lagos, fashion content from Joburg, Afrobeats going global. Now they are uncoordinated, which makes them trusted. Force 3, platforms, YouTube, TikTok, X, the algorithms decide which African stories get amplified. A recommendation engine in San Francisco can decide whether millions see Nairobi's tech scene or a famine. That's power Africa didn't vote for. And this connects to the geopolitical scramble. The US, China, EU, Gulf states are all competing for African markets. If Africa is seen as unstable, it attracts extraction deals. If it's seen as dynamic, it attracts tech, tourism, and services. The narrative simply shapes the deals. Rwanda and Kenya understood this years ago. Kigali's Clean City brand is a business strategy. Silicon Savannah is a positioning play. And the Ecofin agency reported something wild. When researchers removed stereotypes from the equation, people were actually more interested in African cultures than European ones. But let me be honest with you, there is a catch. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie warned about the danger of a single story. If we replace Africa is broken with Africa is all luxury malls, we have just flipped the filter. Africa is complex. A tech startup raising $10 million in Lagos, a water crisis in Johannesburg, a tourist boom in Zanzibar, and a Sahel crisis, all in the same week. All true. And some governments will write this wave to paper over repression. Look how modern we are doesn't mean look how free we are. You see, narrative change without governance reform is just better marketing for the same product. So let me bring this together. For decades, Africa's image was controlled by people with structural incentives to keep it looking broken. And that image cost at least $4.2 billion a year. It suppressed trade, tourism, investment. It made diaspora members hesitant to return. Then smartphones and global platforms gave ordinary Africans the power to publish their own reality. Millions saw it and said, we were lied.
I gotta go back to Joburg soon. I had such a good time out there. The music, the culture, the food, the dance, they're so welcoming.
Now, here is what I want you to walk away with. Every person watching this is holding the mirror right now. If you are diaspora, your story matters. If you are an investor, the data says Africa's risk is overstated and returns are underappreciated. If you are a creator, your content about Africa isn't entertainment. According to the research, it is economic infrastructure. The University of Bath study found that simply exposing people to positive, accurate information about Africa meaningfully shifted attitudes. And a single share can do it. There is a Swahili proverb, Kidole kimoja hakivunji chawa. One finger doesn't crush a louse, it takes the whole hand. The African Union is moving to establish its own credit agency. Narrative organizations are scaling, creators are multiplying. The infrastructure for telling Africa's story on Africa's term is being built. So here's my challenge. Find one piece of content showing an Africa you have never seen. Share it with someone, because according to the data, that actually changes something. And tell me, what was the biggest surprise in this video? The $4.2 billion, the 75%? Drop it in the comment section. Every comment pushes this further, and the further it goes, the more the mirror spreads. I'm Osonwe Luis, you are watching Africa Today, and this is the Strategic Lens. See you in my next video. Bye.